Hello, my name is Olu Osha. I enjoy talking about American presidents, and I'm continuing my discussion on the very consequential presidency of President Lyndon B. Johnson, our 36th president. Uh, Now, I left off on how President Johnson, effectively used what was called the Daisy ad. That was the little girl who was plucking flower petals, and she's counting up, in ascending order, and then she's interjected by an automaton voice that's uh, doing a countdown, counting in reverse, descending order, and then there's suddenly a nuclear explosion. And, this, and then you hear LBJ's voice saying that, that all of God's children, must learn to live together and love one another, or they must die, right? And LBJ won a landslide. Another slogan they were using was that Barry Goldwater, his Republican opponent, to whom all the KKK, with whom the KKK had endorsed, the segregationist white Southerners had moved towards. A slogan LBJ was using was, in your guts, he is not. So they painted Barry Goldwater as being erratic, unstable, unpredictable, and he would instigate a nuclear holocaust. And of course, there was a Cold War. LBJ, importantly, was trying to make rapprochement, and he was moving towards trying to reconcile with the USSR. But this is often overshadowed by his escalation of the Vietnam War. And I talked about having met, somebody who was a patient from the Vietnam War, and all he does is talk about the war, because you could see the trauma. It was a war Americans were not used to. The Vietnamese used guerrilla tactics, and then in the terrain they were in, Americans were not used to fighting in that terrain, and it just caused a lot of horror. Again, it became Lyndon B. Johnson's Waterloo. But right now, before I go into the conspiracy theories that were spun later on, which of course overwhelmed him. But by the way, importantly, LBJ is routinely ranked as one of the best presidents we've ever had, the top 10. Despite how infamous, he was one of the most unpopular presidents by the time he was leaving office, because of the Vietnam War. There was this slogan that protesters used: "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids have you killed today?" Because young Americans were dying. And this was the era of love, the swinging 60s, when people were just wanted to party. Americans wanted to party and experiment with drugs, as they say. They wanted, it was the era of the sexual revolution, and many significant laws that he had passed. For instance, the Higher Education Act now made higher education more accessible to Americans, right? He'd done a number of great things. So, again, the Great Society programs that he passed, and legislation. I wanted to just, focus a little bit on these things. So, despite the the controversy of the and the unpopularity of the Vietnam War, which he escalated, he remains. He's routinely ranked amongst, within the top 10 of American presidents. It would have been significantly higher without the debacle of the Vietnam War, which is often linked to. When we think about 911, everybody call 911. 911 is famous today. Guess what? LBJ's administration was instrumental, was responsible for having the FCC. The FCC is the Federal Communications Commission, which deals with our telecommunications. It's an federal agency that deals with communications, radio, television, and whatnot, internet today. And so they worked with AT&T to use that single number, that we should have a national single number for emergencies that we could use to call the police, 911. And the way that number was picked was unique, because they thought that it's easy to remember, very convenient. And so 911, LBJ's administration was very instrumental in that, and it happened during LBJ's administration. There was the landing on the moon, the Apollo airlift, that space travel. Of course, this was advanced during LBJ's administration. Of course, it was started by President Kennedy, and LBJ, of course, realized this. Unfortunately, there was in 1967, the Apollo 1 crew, exploded. There was a mechanical fault and there was an explosion, and in significantly, LBJ did not let Congress, handle they did not allow. He did not allow an independent investigation. He let NASA. NASA, of course, was responsible. They're responsible for our space travel. He let them conduct their own investigation, and LBJ continued to support them. And there was a successful travel to the moon. Man-crewed flights to the moon, right? So LBJ did a lot in terms of space travel. And he did a lot in terms of the environment. I've mentioned, the Clean Water, Clean Air Act, the Highway Beautification Act. He did very, very instrumental. And I've already talked about how instrumental he was with education, the Head Start program, which helped poor people poor families to have their children educated, and it prepared them for higher education as well. And with the Higher Education Act, it allowed everybody, including disadvantaged people, to get student loans and grants for higher education. So he was very instrumental. His administration was very instrumental in passing laws that advanced social welfare, equality, modernity, and it gave the people from disadvantaged families a leg up. Just helping to advance the realization of the American dream for all Americans, and not just the select few. And that's, of course, remember, that's how America started off. It was just an elect few who had access to the American dream. Now he expanded access to the American dream with his Great Society programs. He created the first Food Stamp Act, right? Food stamp. People now, till today, people get food stamps. The indigent, the poor, they have access to food stamps. He, interestingly, after Bobby Kennedy was assassinated during his presidential run in 1968, he passed the Gun Control Act, which prohibited people, convicted felons, people with mental illnesses, and certain categories of people, prohibited them from having access to handguns. And so it created a lot of restrictions as well. So LBJ was responsible for a lot of these progressive laws that have defined America today as we know it. I want to keep this video short because I'm going to try and get into the conspiracies that have been discredited, but these were just things, part of American history. America, right? You will always have conspiracy theorists always coming up, coming out of the woodworks. Anytime something, they find bizarre happens. So LBJ was very significant, very instrumental in the way our society has advanced towards social justice, making social justice, equality, human rights, accessible to all Americans, and not just the cabal of an elect few of Americans based on race, who have access to these smoke-filled rooms where in the past, American presidents were picked, and other Americans based on race did not have access to. Remember, by the time of the presidencies of Chester A. Arthur, who started to pass racist immigration laws with the Chinese Exclusion Act, and of course Teddy Roosevelt as well. They were passing racist immigration laws, basically restricting immigration from certain nations, and then Woodrow Wilson took it up a notch with his Immigration Act of 1917 with the Asiatic Barred Zone, which was prohibiting immigration from Asia, and then of course under President Calvin Coolidge with the Immigration Act of 1924, which barred immigration from Asia, and of course gave national origin quotas, restricting immigration from certain European, Eastern European nations, while Britain and other Northern European nations were favored. With LBJ's Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, he eliminated these barriers to immigration and the national origin quotas. He eliminated them, and of course, as I mentioned in an earlier video, people like me, I'm an immigrant, and I'm an American citizen. I'm a naturalized American citizen. I came here, originally, and to study, and while I was not escaping wars, I come from a well-off background, and I'm fortunate. I'm proud of the background that I come from. In fact, when I became an American citizen, they told me that you don't have to give up your culture. You can still. America is a place where we have diverse groups and cultures. So I'm proud of my Nigerian and Yoruba ancestry, my descent, but I'm proud as an American as well. And it blew my mind, after I graduated from law school, that I was pursued and hired by the Department of Defense. I was picked as a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow. If you look at the profile of the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow today of incumbent fellows, you will see that there's no single black person. They're just white faces there. I was picked, in my cohort, and I was told that I was not just picked, but I was the number one pick, right? I was not born in this country. I'm an American citizen, and I was called to come and do service to the federal government, and I was very proud of it. America is a very complex country, and there are nuances. You have to look at it in a very nuanced way. You can't just say America is racist. You can't say that, because there are people like